On the day my divorce was finalized, I was told to leave with nothing. When I walked out of the Whitmore estate, I had $31 in my wallet and nowhere safe to go. My phone was nearly dead when a message from an old college friend lit up the screen, a link to a discreet placement notice. I stopped on one word: protection. A roof, a meal, a place the Whitmores could never reach. That was already more than I'd had an hour earlier. The address led me to the wrought iron gates of an old stone house on Beacon Hill. Only after the butler opened the door did I learn who had posted the notice. Damian Marchetti, head of the oldest Italian family in Boston's underworld. I had only wanted somewhere to sleep. Somehow I became the legal mother of his brother's 3 children, and the contract wife of Damian Marchetti himself. You passed last night's interview. You want me to marry you? I need to give the court someone who can stay. Later, my ex-husband, Julian Whitmore, stood in front of me with the same lazy arrogance he'd always worn like cologne, and asked, "Do you understand yet how wrong you were?" Before I could answer, one of the triplets stepped in front of me. Little Sophia wrapped herself around my leg and looked up at him. My mom wasn't wrong. Her 2 brothers flanked her, staring Julian down without blinking. Damian set one hand at my waist, and his voice came out calm enough to freeze the room. "Mr. Whitmore, my wife owes no explanation to a man who lost the right to speak to her. I never imagined that a listing for a live-in caretaker would lead me into the most dangerous family in the city." The Marchetti estate sat behind black iron gates on Beacon Hill, its crest worked in black and gold above the entrance. The man who met me at the door introduced himself as Victor. "I run this house," he said. His eyes moved over my rain-soaked coat, then to the worn handbag in my hand. I wished I could hide it. "Miss Bennet, this house doesn't hire women to decorate a room or charm the head of the family. If you come inside, the children's needs come first. The household rules come second. Your curiosity comes last. Don't ask about locked doors. Don't repeat names you overhear. Don't promise these children anything you can't keep." I tightened my grip on the strap of my bag and nodded. "I understand. I won't cross any lines." 9 hours earlier, I had signed my divorce papers. Julian's lawyer had slid the documents across a conference table. "Mrs. Whitmore, under the terms of the prenuptial agreement, you have no claim to any Whitmore family assets, and no right to remain in the house." I lowered my eyes to the papers. "Is that all?" The lawyer hesitated. Mr. Whitmore also asked his assistant to pass along a message. I looked up. If she wants to leave, let her leave clean. Julian hadn't even bothered to show up. I signed my name and walked out of the house I'd lived in for 4 years with $31 in my wallet. A man in a dark suit led me down a long corridor. I recognized his face before anyone said it. Damian Marchetti, the current head of the Marchetti family. Rumor said he'd inherited the whole operation at 19 and rebuilt a crumbling empire through the freight yards, private card rooms, import companies, and negotiations no newspaper ever printed a word about. His gaze settled on me. "She's the applicant." Victor bowed his head. "Yes, sir." Damian handed a set of rosary beads to Victor. "Return these to the chapel." The man confessed enough for one night. Then he turned toward the dining room, where a small boy stood at a chessboard glaring at him. "You promised to finish this game with me." His eyes were heavy with sleep, and still he was demanding it. Across the table, a little girl clutched a stuffed rabbit in one hand, her bowl of soup untouched in front of her. Damian sighed, and a girl too small to reach the table had somehow managed to pin the most feared man in the city right where he stood. "Sir, Miss Bennet is here." Both boys turned to look at me. One studied me with cold, careful attention. The other looked openly annoyed. "Need a hand with anything?" "Name, Claire Bennet." He nodded once, then looked at the boys. "Adrian, Leo, upstairs. The game isn't finished. Tomorrow." What about my story? The younger one demanded, pulling his blanket tighter around his shoulders. 2 chapters tomorrow. The boys climbed the stairs with obvious reluctance, then stopped on the landing to watch. Get her to eat 3 bites and you can stay the night. The butler, the housekeepers, the guards by the door, and the 2 boys on the stairs all turned to look at me. My divorce papers were still folded at the bottom of my bag, and the money in my wallet reminded me that even a dangerous house had more to offer than a wet sidewalk, food, and a door that could close behind me. I set my bag down at my feet and smoothed my damp coat. Give me a napkin and a pen. When the napkin and pen arrived, the dining room had gone quiet except for Sophia's broken little sobs. She was still holding the rabbit. Her shoulders shook as she cried, but her fingers stayed locked around the toy. What's her name? I asked, nodding at the rabbit. Sophia looked at me through tears and pulled the toy closer. Daisy. Miss Daisy, I said, and nodded. That's a beautiful name. A quiet snort came from the staircase landing. I didn't turn around. Sophia watched me with the wary look of a cornered animal. Damien's arm tightened around her. Tonight I only want you to eat dinner, I told her. Whether your uncle likes me isn't my job. I drew 3 small boxes on the napkin. 3 bites. After each one, you mark a box. When all 3 boxes are full, I leave the table, and you decide if I get to come back tomorrow. Sophia stared at the napkin. I decide? She sniffled, glanced at Damien, then back at me. What if I say no? Then I won't bother you at breakfast. The answer seemed to catch her off guard. She looked down at Daisy as if asking the rabbit's opinion, and at last whispered, 1 bite. Damien set her back in her chair. I scooped up a small spoonful of soup, blew on it until it cooled, and held it near her mouth without touching her. Sophia hesitated for a few seconds before opening her lips. From the stairs, Leo whispered, she actually ate. Adrian said nothing, but his grip on the banister loosened. Sophia swallowed, took the pen, and marked the first box with a crooked line. That counts. It does. The second bite went faster. After she marked the second box, she pulled Daisy close and studied me again. You won't touch my hair. Not unless you ask me to. The third bite came on her own terms. She leaned forward, swallowed, and drew a hard line through the last box. No one in the dining room said a word. All done. 3 bites. Sophia held the rabbit and looked up at me. Will you leave tonight? I didn't give her a pretty promise I couldn't keep. I want tonight, I said. Not tonight. She watched me for a long moment, then pushed the napkin toward me. You can come back tomorrow. Something shifted in Damien's gray eyes as he watched. He didn't praise me. He only turned to the housekeeper. Bring her another bowl of soup. And to Victor. Prepare a guest room. 2nd floor. The room beside the nursery. Victor bowed his head. Understood. When I stood, my knees were numb from crouching too long. Before I could reach for my bag, the boys had already come down. Adrian reached me first and handed me a broken music box with a tiny ballerina missing 1 arm. It's broken. I can try, I said, taking it. Leo moved slower, his blanket dragging behind him. As he passed, he muttered, she doesn't like her milk too hot, and she doesn't like strangers touching her hair, then seemed to regret saying so much, and ran back upstairs. Damien came to stand beside me, his eyes on the broken music box. You handled her fear well. I just didn't rush her. He looked at me again, more carefully this time. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, my study. At 8 the next morning, Victor opened the study door for me. Damien sat behind a long table in a black suit, 2 documents from the night before waiting in front of him. I stopped at the edge of the table. I thought I was here to look after the children. You passed last night's interview, he said, sliding the papers toward me. Now I need to give the courts someone who can stay. He spoke with the calm of a man discussing terms, not feelings. The Marchetti family has enemies watching these children. A part-time caretaker can't clear the security system, sign medical authorizations, or represent them at school events. Sophia has already watched too many people walk out of her life. She needs a mother written into the law. You want me to marry you? I sat down. On paper. Where would I live? Second floor. The room you slept in last night. Mine is on the third. How far do my duties extend? Care for the 3 children, help them adjust to something resembling a normal life, attend family functions as Mrs. Marchetti when it's required. No marital obligations, I said. Damien turned the contract to a single page and tapped a line with one finger. There is no such clause. I read it twice before asking, what about money? A personal account will be opened in your name. Household expenses come from the family account. Anything transferred into your private account is yours to keep. Even if we divorce? Even then. I looked at the contract. I've signed an agreement before. I walked away from it with $31. Damien turned to the lawyer standing near the wall. Add a clause. Any funds transferred into Claire Bennett's personal account during this marriage remain her separate property. The Marchetti family may not reclaim them after divorce, separation, or termination of this agreement for any reason. The lawyer began revising immediately. Damien looked back at me. Raising children is labor. This family doesn't take labor for free. The Whitmore family never called it labor. Then they were poorer than they looked. For a moment I thought of the Whitmore house, where the cooking and the cleaning and the raising of a stepchild had all quietly become unpaid work the day the housekeeper was let go. On the day of my divorce, they'd said I'd been living off them for 4 years. I pressed my fingers around the pen. One more thing. If the children don't need me someday, can I leave? Yes. You won't stop me. I'll compensate you according to the agreement, and make sure you're protected. He didn't rush me. The contract was dangerous, but its terms were clear: conditions, boundaries, and a door out. At last, I signed. After the lawyer collected the papers, Damien opened a small black velvet box. Inside sat an onyx and gold brooch shaped around the Marchetti crest. Wear it. I picked it up. What happens if I lose it? Damien glanced at Victor, whose eyebrows shot up at once. Victor won't sleep. I almost laughed. He pinned the brooch to my coat himself, while Adrian and Leo crowded in behind me to watch. Sophia stared at the crest on my chest. Are you going to live here now? The agreement says I will. She didn't understand the agreement, but she understood stay. She held Daisy tighter. Can she be in charge of bedtime stories? Depends on how long the story is. Short, Leo said immediately. Adrian glanced at him. Yesterday's book was 30 pages. That night I moved into the room beside the children's wing. After my shower, while I was still combing out my hair, a stuffed rabbit appeared through the crack in my door, followed by Sophia's small face. Does the agreement say anything about bedtime stories? No. Her face fell. At the end of the hall, Adrian stood holding the broken music box, and Leo carried a thick storybook, both pretending they'd just happened to be passing by. I opened the door wider. We can add a verbal clause. During my first week as Mrs. Marchetti, the second floor slowly stopped being so quiet. Every morning Sophia came to my door with Daisy in her arms. Sometimes she needed a hair clip. Sometimes she wanted to know if there'd be strawberries at breakfast. Every excuse eventually circled back to the same question. Are you staying here today too? Yes. Only then would she head downstairs. Adrian still didn't talk much. When I worked on the broken music box, he sat nearby with a book and reminded me which screw not to touch. Leo complained I read too slowly, yet every night he was the first to shove a storybook into my hands. Damien usually left early and came home late. Sometimes when I went downstairs after midnight to warm milk for Sophia, I'd find him at the far end of the table with papers spread out and quiet men reporting to him. When he noticed me, he only asked, "She's awake again?" I'd nod, and he'd wave his men aside. On the seventh morning, I told Victor I needed to run an errand. The music box repair shop had called. The ballerina could be fixed, but I needed to bring the missing arm the housekeeper had found under Sophia's dresser. Before I could answer, Sophia came running down the stairs with Daisy in her arms. "You're going out?" "To fix your music box and to pick up some medicine." Her fingers tightened around the rabbit. "I'm going too." In the end, all three children climbed into the car. Victor stood by the door. "Miss Sophia hasn't willingly left this gate since her mother disappeared." I looked into the car. Sophia sat with Daisy in her lap, her eyes fixed on me. As long as I was there, she seemed able to endure whatever waited beyond the window. The repair shop sat in a narrow storefront in the north end, crowded with old clocks, brass keys, and glass cases of mechanical toys. Sophia stood on a stool at the counter while the owner opened the music box. Adrian leaned in close, tracking every movement. Leo pretended not to care and kept asking if there was a bakery nearby. The owner fitted the tiny arm back onto the ballerina, wound the key, and set the box down. Music trembled out. Sophia held her breath until the ballerina began to spin. "She's dancing again." When we stepped outside, Damien was already waiting at the curb, a black coat over one arm, two guards standing behind him. His eyes settled on the children walking calmly at my side, and stayed there. "Victor called, said you'd all left the house." Sophia held the repaired music box against her chest. I didn't cry. "I can see that," Damien said. Leo added, "She only crushed one candy in the car." Sophia immediately tried to step on his shoe. Damien looked between them and me, his voice lowering. "Thank you." That night, Damien came up to the second-floor sitting room with a set of keys. "If you're taking them out again, you'll need a car that doesn't announce my name 3 blocks away." I looked down at the keys. "That's unusually practical for a man in your position. You may be the first person in this city to accuse me of practicality." The next morning, an old dark green sedan sat parked outside the garage, wildly out of place beside the row of black armored cars. Sophia pressed herself to the window. "Daisy says she loves the green one." Damien stood on the steps, watching the children circle the car. I walked over. "Thank you. The guards will follow when you take them out." "I know. If anything happens, call me." I nodded and opened the door. Sophia climbed in first, then Adrian and Leo. As the door shut, Damien stayed where he was, watching the 3 faces through the glass. Only then did I understand he'd given me more than a room inside a guarded house. He'd placed the softest part of his life in my hands. A week after the green car appeared, I took the triplets to the preview hall for the Marchetti Children's Arts and Safety Foundation. Damien's family funded the yearly charity auction, and a wall had been set aside for drawings submitted by children from around the city. Sophia's drawing of Daisy had been chosen. She stood in front of it, silent and pink-cheeked, while Adrian straightened the little name card beneath the frame. Leo grinned. "Look, Daisy looks like a bunny princess." I was kneeling to fix the ribbon on Sophia's dress when a familiar voice sounded behind me. "Claire." My fingers paused. Julian Whitmore stood near the champagne table in a perfectly tailored gray suit, his hair immaculate, a young aide behind him, holding a folder stamped with the Whitmore Foundation seal. Only a few weeks had passed since the divorce. He looked untouched by all of it. His gaze moved from my hands at Sophia's hem to the 3 children around me, and a slow smile spread across his face. "I almost didn't recognize you. Honor roll, top of your class, and now you're dressing up mob kids for a charity photo op. Is this really your life now?" Sophia held Daisy tighter and moved closer to me. Leo's face darkened instantly. Adrian said nothing, but his eyes flicked to Julian's aide, then to the security badge on the man's lapel. I stood and kept my voice level. Julian, move. He laughed as if I'd said something amusing. Still stubborn, his eyes dropped to the onyx crest pinned to my coat. Recognition didn't reach him. I suppose life outside the Whitmore name has taught you something. No matter how much you complained before, at least you were Mrs. Whitmore. What are you now? A nanny with a borrowed brooch. We're divorced. That doesn't change the fact that you were my wife, he said, his voice cooling. When people mention your name, they still think of mine. Showing up here as hired help for the Marchettis makes me look ridiculous. Leo stepped forward, but Adrian caught his sleeve. Sophia looked up at me and asked softly, "Why is he talking to you like that?" "Because he's used to it." Julian frowned. "Claire, don't act tough in front of children. You left me because you wanted me to regret it." "Fine. I admit you surprised me." He raised a hand toward my shoulder, the way he used to. I stepped back. His hand froze in midair, his expression sharpening. "Enough. The other women meant nothing. I haven't let anyone move into your room. The seat next to me is still empty." I looked at him and felt like I was looking at a stranger. Once I'd waited for his explanation. I'd waited for an apology. Now he stood in front of me, offering the empty space beside him, like I should be grateful. "I'm not interested." His eyes darkened. "You're not in a position to say that." He lowered his voice. "How much money do you have left? You really think the Marchettis will treat you like one of their own? Once they're done with you, you won't even have a way back." He glanced at the triplets, his smile turning colder. "Playing house with mob children, Claire. You'll do anything to prove a point." Adrian's eyes went completely still. Leo clenched his teeth. "Shut up. This is between adults," Julian snapped. But Sophia had already stepped in front of me. Daisy clutched to her chest, her small body trembling, her voice ringing out clear. "Who said she was wrong?" The noise of the hall dropped low. Julian looked down at her, as if only just realizing a child had challenged him in public. "Little girl, when adults are talking." "He wasn't wrong," Sophia cut in, her voice even clearer than before. "You can't talk about her like that." Leo stepped beside her, his shirt bunching in his fist. "You heard her. She said you can't." "Is this how the Marchetti family raises its children?" Julian sneered. Adrian moved to my other side and eased Sophia half a step behind him. He didn't rush to argue the way Leo did. He only lifted his eyes to the badge on Julian's aide and spoke, his voice far too calm for a child. "Julian Whitmore, you just insulted a guest of the Marchetti Foundation at its own event, and now you're calling Marchetti children ill-mannered." Guests began to slow around them, and the men standing near Julian quietly stopped smiling. He finally understood this wasn't the Whitmore dinner table, and no one here owed him a lecture. Still, he wouldn't lower his head in front of me. "Claire, don't drag children into this. There's nothing between us to drag them into." He laughed coldly. "You think a few kids speaking up for you changes anything?" "Her situation is excellent." The low voice came from the entrance. Guards parted the crowd as Damien walked in, the Marchetti crest on his black suit catching the light. The murmur in the room faded almost instantly. Sophia's eyes reddened at the sight of him, but she didn't run to him. She stayed in front of me, as if her job of protecting me wasn't finished yet. Damien's gaze moved from her to Adrian and Leo, then settled on the slightly crooked brooch on my chest. He came to my side and straightened it himself. Julian's face changed. Only then did Damien look at him. "Mr. Whitmore." "Don Marchetti," Julian said, his mouth tight. "There's been a misunderstanding. Claire is my ex-wife. She's been emotionally unstable lately, and I was only—" "You called her this family's nanny," Damien said, his tone calm, but the men around Julian had already begun putting distance between themselves and him. "Let me correct that." He took my hand and drew me half a step forward. Claire Bennett is my lawful wife, mother to the 3 Marchetti children, and co-sponsor of tonight's preview. Impossible, Julian said. Sophia rounded on him at once. Why is it impossible? Because his eyes don't work, Leo answered before anyone else could. Adrian frowned. Leo, I'm stating a fact. Sophia nodded hard, holding Daisy tighter. Damien didn't stop them. He simply rested a hand at my waist and continued, even and unhurried. From today, anyone who insults her at a Marchetti event insults the Marchetti family. Julian opened his mouth, but no explanation came. A middle-aged man beside him spoke first. Don Marchetti, Mr. Whitmore's comments have nothing to do with us. We were only invited to the preview, and we meant no offense to Mrs. Marchetti. Another added quickly, we weren't aware of their history. Julian turned on them, his expression ugly, and the men who'd surrounded him only minutes before stepped away on their own. Victor came to Damien's side. Whitmore Pharmaceuticals is on tonight's supplier list. Remove it, Damien said lightly. Yes, sir. Julian's face changed completely. Don Marchetti, Whitmore Pharma has supplied your foundation for 3 years. You can't end that partnership over one word from Claire. Damien looked at me. Do you want to give him that chance? Every eye in the room turned to me. Julian said quickly, Claire, don't be childish. This company involves more than me. Hundreds of employees depend on it. Are you really going to blow up a partnership over something this small? I looked at him and remembered the message he'd sent through his assistant on the day of our divorce. If she wants to leave, let her leave clean. To him, my marriage, my dignity, and wherever I ended up afterward, could all be dismissed in a single sentence. Now that his own interests were touched, he suddenly remembered that some things mattered. Mr. Whitmore said I embarrassed his family, I said. In that case, his family shouldn't want a partnership handed to them by someone who embarrasses them. The color drained from Julian's face inch by inch. Damien looked at Victor. You heard her. I heard her, sir. Damien turned to the gallery manager. Put Mrs. Marchetti's name at the main entrance tonight. Re-register the guest list. Exclude the Whitmore party. The manager agreed at once. Julian stood there looking, for the first time, like a man expelled from a world he'd assumed belonged to him. Sophia quietly slipped her hand into mine, then looked up. Did I do good? I crouched down and fixed the crooked clip in her hair. You did really well. Leo squeezed in closer immediately. What about me? You too. Adrian stood beside us and held out for a few seconds before finally asking, And me? I looked at his solemn little face and smiled. You were the calmest one there. All 3 of them lit up at once. Damien stood behind us, watching, and after a moment offered me his hand. Mrs. Marchetti, the main hall is about to open. I looked at his hand, then at the 3 children beside me. Julian had told me I had no standing here. Yet Sophia was holding my hand, Leo stood at my other side, Adrian carried the event booklet, and Damien Marchetti was waiting for me in front of everyone. I put my hand in his. The car stayed quiet on the ride home. Sophia sat beside me with Daisy in her arms, one hand gripping my coat. Leo stared out the window while Adrian wrote something on the back of the event booklet, his pen moving carefully across the page. I didn't cry, and I didn't feel humiliated. Julian's words felt like they'd come from somewhere far away, though familiar enough to tighten my chest before I could talk myself out of it. By the time we reached the estate, night had fallen. Sophia pulled me upstairs the moment the car stopped. In my room, she set Daisy on my pillow and clipped a little pearl barrette to the rabbit's ear. She'll guard you tonight. Leo set a small cake wrapped in a napkin on my nightstand. From the foundation, they had too many left. Adrian handed me the folded event booklet. Inside were the names of the people who'd stood near Julian, their companies, even a few license plate numbers. Why did you write all this down? He might come back, Adrian said. We need to know who he brings, Leo added. Sophia nodded. Bad people bring helpers. The ache in my chest loosened a little. You already protected me today. Sophia frowned. Not enough. It was enough. I crouched and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. You were very brave. Her eyes welled. Will you be sad because of what he said? A little, but not because he was right. Leo answered immediately. Damien stood in the doorway, his black shirt sleeves rolled to his forearms, his gaze moving over Daisy on the pillow, the cake on the nightstand, the booklet in Adrian's hand. May I come in? Yes. Damien stepped inside and took the booklet from Adrian. After reading a few lines, he said, Well done. Adrian's shoulders relaxed. Leo looked up. I helped too. What did you do? I remembered the guy in the blue tie. He had the fakest smile. Damien paused, then nodded. Also useful. Sophia lifted her face. What about me? Damien looked down at her. You stepped forward first. She pressed her lips together, fighting a smile. After Victor took the children off to wash up, the room went quiet. Damien set the booklet on the table. Julian won't get into a Marchetti event again. Thank you. You don't need to thank me. It's mine to handle. I looked toward the dark courtyard beyond the window. I don't want this family standing in front of me for everything. I already left one house. I don't want to hand myself over to another. Damien watched me for a moment. Protecting you doesn't mean owning you, he said. From the moment you signed the agreement, anyone who wants to hurt you has to go through me first. That's not charity, and it's not control. His voice dropped. It's responsibility. I thought of how Julian had once promised to protect me, and how that protection always came with conditions. Behave, endure, swallow every insult for the sake of his family's reputation. No one in this house had ever said that to me. Then they were poorer than they looked, I said, and laughed despite myself, something in my chest finally easing. There's a family gala the night after tomorrow, Damien said. The Conti family, the Russos, and a few others tied to the freight unions will be there. Do you want me to go? Asked Mrs. Marchetti. My fingers moved to the brooch. But if I make a mistake, then their understanding is lacking. I truly laughed at that. You can refuse. The agreement doesn't require you to stand in front of everyone tonight. I looked at Daisy on my bed, then at the booklet full of names. After today, I could no longer pretend these children were only duties written into a contract. I'll go. I moved toward the door. Before leaving, he paused. Set Daisy by the door before you sleep. Sophia will want to make sure you're still here. He left after saying it. That night, I set the rabbit on the small chair by my door. Sometime in the night, someone stopped there for a few seconds, then quietly left. The next morning, Daisy held a piece of candy in her arms. Beside her lay a note in Sophia's crooked handwriting, for Mom. 2 nights later, the family gala was held at the Marchetti-owned opera house by the harbor, its ivy-covered walls glowing under the lights. Black cars lined the entrance, and guests moved through the lobby in tailored suits and evening gowns. On the surface, businessmen, philanthropists, councilmen, and foundation directors. Beneath that surface ran the freight docks, the unions, and the security firms that kept them running. I wore a black velvet gown with the onyx Marchetti crest pinned at my chest. Damien adjusted the wrap over my shoulders. Nervous? A little. Walk with me. When you need to speak, I'll be looking at you. Sophia had wanted to come, but Victor kept her home. Before I left, she'd pinned Daisy's own little clip to my clutch and whispered, If someone gives you trouble, show them this. Damien noticed the clip, said nothing, and led me into the hall. Attention found us quickly. The old matriarch of the Conti family approached first, her gaze touching the crest on my chest. Damien, You finally brought Mrs. Marchetti out. He stayed calm. She doesn't care for noise. The old woman turned to me. Then tonight will be difficult for you. I'll adapt. She studied me for a few seconds and nodded, her smile turning more genuine. After a round of greetings, Damien was pulled aside by several men tied to the freight unions. I stood near the windows with a glass of champagne when a familiar voice came from behind me. Claire, Julian had come again. His suit was still immaculate, but the careless smile from the preview event was gone. Whitmore Pharma got the notice removing us from the supplier list. Are you satisfied? That was the Foundation's decision. Don't pretend it has nothing to do with you. He lowered his voice. Damien Marchetti listens to you now. One word from you and we're back on that list. His tone softened. I admit I went too far last time. You don't have to take this all the way. I'm not the one taking it too far. His face tightened. Business and personal grudges should stay separate. Handling this emotionally only makes people think you don't deserve the position you're in. That line was too familiar, undeserving, unrefined, improper, emotional. Before I could answer, Damien arrived at my side. He didn't look at Julian. Do you need me to handle this? I looked at him. You said you'd look at me when I needed to speak tonight. He lowered his eyes to mine. I'm looking at you now. I turned back to Julian. Whether Whitmore Pharma goes back on that list isn't going to be decided by my feelings. Your supplier records for the last 3 years will be reviewed. Pricing, sourcing, procurement accounts, all of it. Julian's face changed. If there's nothing wrong, the Foundation won't wrong you, I continued. If there is something wrong, asking me won't help. Do you understand what you're saying? Yes. Damien lifted a hand, and Victor came over at once. Have the audit team take over Whitmore Pharma's records first thing tomorrow. Understood. Julian finally panicked. Damien, you can't investigate my family over one sentence from her. Only then did Damien look at him. She asked for a review, Mr. Whitmore. She didn't pass judgment. If your company is clean, you should thank her for the chance to prove it. Several people nearby had already caught the words audit team and records. Julian's acquaintances began finding reasons to leave. Damien stopped bothering with him. He looked down at me. Do you want to stay? I shook my head. I want to go home. Then we'll go. On the ride back, the privacy partition rose, leaving the two of us alone. When I peeled off my gloves, I realized my palms had gone cold. Damien reached toward me, then stopped halfway, waiting. I looked at his hand and slowly placed mine in it. His palm was warm. He only held it. You handled that well, he said. I only followed the rules you set. That's the Marchetti family's preferred method. I looked out the window as the harbor light slid across the glass. Julian will probably hate me even more now. He already lost the right to come near you. His gaze rested on my face, his voice lower than usual. Claire, you don't have to hold yourself together every time. He sat close enough that I caught the faint scent of cedar and leather. For once, I didn't move away. His eyes dropped to my mouth, then shifted aside. He released my hand and drew the wrap back over my shoulder. Sleep early once we're back. I looked down at the wrap he'd just adjusted. Damien, yes. Thank you for asking me first. He looked at me for a long moment. Your voice should always be yours to use. By the next morning, word that the audit team had walked into Whitmore Pharma had already spread through half the city. I heard it at breakfast. Leo was cutting his eggs into uneven pieces when Victor quietly reported to Damien, who looked up immediately. So the bad guy's in trouble now. Adrian set down his glass of milk. We wait for the audit results. Leo stared at him. Why do you sound like a lawyer? Because you sound like a witness. Sophia didn't follow the details. She just sat beside me with Daisy in her arms and quietly pushed yesterday's note, for Mom, toward my plate. I saw it and didn't call attention to it. Breakfast was nearly over when the gate intercom crackled to life. Victor listened through his earpiece, then leaned toward Damien. "Sir, Julian Whitmore is at the gate. Says he has something he needs to hand Mrs. Marchetti personally." My hand paused around my cup. Damien looked at me. "You don't have to see him." Sophia clutched Daisy. "He came again." Leo set his fork down hard. "Told you bad people bring helpers." I set down my cup. "I'll see him, but not alone." Damien stood. "I'll go with you." At the outer gate, Julian stood beyond the iron bars, blocked by 2 guards. He looked worse than the night before, a dark envelope in his hand, his tie slightly crooked. When he saw Damien beside me, his expression tightened. "These are things you left at my house. I had someone collect them." I didn't reach for the envelope. Victor took it, checked it, then handed it to me. Inside were a few old photographs, a key I no longer used, and a silk scarf I'd nearly forgotten. Julian looked at the scarf. "You used to like that. I don't need it now." His face tightened for a moment. "Claire, I didn't come here to argue. The audit's frozen several of our accounts. The board's been in session since dawn. My mother's not well. If the past still means anything to you, tell Marchetti to stop." I looked at him and understood he hadn't come to apologize. He'd come because Whitmore Pharma was losing something he couldn't afford to lose. "The audit isn't my doing." Julian frowned. "Do you have to be this cold? How would you prefer I speak?" "At least remember you lived under our roof for 4 years. My mother could be strict, but she never truly mistreated you. My sister was young. As her sister-in-law, would it have killed you to give a little?" Before I could answer, Sophia slipped past Victor and ran to my side. "Why should she give anything?" she demanded, glaring up at him. Julian's face darkened. "You again." Sophia hugged Daisy tighter. "You can't be mean to her. I'm speaking to her. This isn't your place." Damien's eyes went cold, but Adrian spoke first. "This is Marchetti, private property. You're standing outside the gate, raising your voice at a member of this family." Leo added, "And you're asking for help very badly." Julian's patience cracked. "Claire, is this how you're raising them? You really think they see you as their mother? You're just the woman Damien Marchetti brought in to keep his brother's kids stable." The air went still. Sophia's eyes welled, but she stepped forward anyway. "She is my mom." Julian stared at her. Her voice shook, but every word landed clear. "You can't say she isn't." Leo stepped beside her. "Ours too." Adrian was quiet a moment, then added, "It's written in the agreement, and we accept it." My throat tightened. Julian's face shifted between anger and disbelief. "This is ridiculous. Claire, now you're using children too." Damien stepped forward. Only one step, but the guards beyond the gate adjusted their stance instantly. "Mr. Whitmore, you were allowed to stand here because Claire agreed to see you. Now she's seen you." Julian clenched his jaw. "You're throwing me out? I'm informing you. As of today, you're banned from all Marchetti private property. If anyone from your family needs to deliver documents, Victor will receive them." "Understood," Victor said. Damien turned back. "As for Whitmore Pharma, the audit continues. This family's boardroom troubles aren't Claire's responsibility." Julian tried to speak again, but the guards had already closed in. I held Sophia and watched him get forced back from the gate. For the first time, he no longer looked like a man standing above me passing judgment. He looked furious and humiliated, and he could no longer reach me. Sophia quietly took my hand. "Mom, let's go home." The word swallowed every other sound. I looked down at her, my eyes warm, and smiled. "Okay." Damien stood beside us, shielding us from the last of Julian's glare, and we turned back toward the house. This time, I didn't look back. After Julian was banned from the property, The estate stayed quiet for a couple of days. The audit at Whitmore Pharma continued. Victor brought new updates into Damien's study every day, but Damien never mentioned it at breakfast, and the children never asked. That afternoon, I finally finished repairing Sophia's music box. The missing ballerina had been replaced with a small silver rabbit, the old mechanism cleaned and oiled. When the key turned, the familiar melody rose slowly from inside. Sophia stood beside me with Daisy in her arms, her eyes bright. "It works. Try it." She wound it carefully, and the silver rabbit began to turn. Leo leaned in too close, and Adrian pulled him back by the sleeve. "I was just looking." Sophia ignored them, watching the rabbit spin, then asked softly, "Did my mom know how to fix things too?" The room went quiet. It was the first time she'd mentioned her mother to me. I set the screwdriver down. "I don't know, but I'm sure she wanted your things to be safe." Sophia hugged Daisy tighter. "She left before she could fix it." My chest tightened. Footsteps sounded outside the door. Damien stood there, his gaze moving from the music box to Sophia. "Victor will take you all to the greenhouse before dinner." Sophia looked at him as if she understood adults needed the room. She picked up the music box and left with Daisy. Leo tried to linger, but Adrian dragged him out. When we were alone, Damien walked to the window. "Their mother didn't leave by choice." I looked up. 4 years ago, someone inside our own organization sold out one of our freight routes. My brother and his wife were coming back from outside the city when their car was forced off a bridge. The public story was an accident. It wasn't. The children were there. I heard them, in the other car. Adrian saw the fire. Leo heard the shots. Sophia was too young to really understand. She only remembered her mother had promised to fix the music box when she got home. Only then did I understand why the broken toy had been kept for so long. That's why you put the children under your name. They needed a name that could keep them alive, and guardianship no family council could take away. He spoke calmly, but there was weight underneath it. The marriage contract was part of that too. Yes, a temporary caretaker can be replaced. A legal mother is harder to remove. I'd thought the world had thrown me into this house by chance. Now I understood the blood underneath every clause. Damien came closer and stopped in front of me. "I didn't tell you at first, because all you needed then was a room to sleep in. Knowing more would only have made you less safe. And now you've stood in front of them. I won't keep showing you only half the truth." Outside, the children's voices drifted up from the greenhouse. Sophia laughed at something, and Leo answered immediately. "What happens when they grow up and don't need me anymore?" Damien was quiet a moment. "That depends on whether you want to stay." I lifted my eyes to him. "I won't use these children to keep you here, Claire." The words loosened something in me, and hurt a little at the same time. "And you?" The room went still. I knew the question crossed the line of our agreement. I let it stand. Damien looked at me for a long time. "I want you to stay for reasons that have nothing to do with the contract, or the children." My fingers curled slowly. He didn't step closer. "May I touch you?" I looked at him and nodded. Damien raised his hand and brushed his fingers along the side of my face, careful, almost restrained, as if he expected me to pull away. I didn't. He lowered his head and kissed my temple. It was brief, but something in me finally settled. Then Leo's voice came from the hallway. "Can we come in?" Sophia says. "The music box has to sit at dinner." Damien closed his eyes for a second. I laughed. He stepped back, his expression calm again, though the tips of his ears had gone faintly red. "Come in." The door opened at once. Sophia rushed in with the music box, Leo behind her. Adrian followed more slowly, watching me as if checking that everything was all right. "Can it sit beside me tonight?" "Yes." She nodded, satisfied. "You have to sit beside me too." I glanced at Damien. He said nothing. That night, the music box sat at the center of the dinner table, the silver rabbit turning slowly through the old melody, while the children told me about the white roses blooming in the greenhouse, and Damien sat at the other end of the table, glancing over now and then. This house held wounds and secrets. Still, the place it had given me was beginning to feel real. The audit results came sooner than expected. On the third morning, Victor brought the report into the dining room, while I helped Sophia straighten the ribbon on Daisy's ear. Leo stood on a chair trying to steal cookies, and Adrian pulled him down without changing his expression. Damien read the file and closed it. 2 batches of children's rehabilitation equipment supplied by Whitmore Pharma failed procurement standards. Prices were nearly 30% above market, and the excess funds moved through accounts tied to a private Whitmore family foundation. The dining room went still. Leo hugged the cookie jar. So he really is bad. Adrian looked at Damien. The audit confirmed it? Yes. Sophia clutched Daisy. Will he come after Mom again? Before I could answer, Victor took a call, and a few seconds later his face darkened. Sir Julian Whitmore is at his lawyer's office, requesting a meeting with Mrs. Marchetti. Damien said, Refuse. Wait. I set down the ribbon. I want to see him one last time, at his lawyer's office, with your people there. Damien looked at me for a moment before nodding. I'll go with you. Julian was already waiting in the conference room. He looked worse than before, his tie loose, his eyes bloodshot, a stack of disordered files on the table. When I entered, he stood at once, then stiffened at the sight of Damien behind me. Claire, I only want to speak to you alone. You don't have that privilege, Damien said. Julian clenched his jaw, but didn't argue. I sat without touching the water on the table. What do you want to say? Julian looked at me, as if swallowing what was left of his pride. The board suspended me. My mother's ill. My sister's surrounded by reporters. Whitmore Pharma needs time. If the Marchetti Foundation backs off, we still have a chance to fix this. I listened quietly. He talked about the board, the press, his mother, his sister, the company. Not once did he apologize. So what do you want from me? Talk to Damien. He leaned forward. If you ask him, he'll listen. Claire, you have that power now. He used to believe I had no power at all, that I'd be nothing once I left his family. Now he finally admitted I had power, only because he needed it. Do you remember the message you sent me the day of our divorce? I asked. His expression shifted. I said it for him. If she wants to leave, let her leave clean. The room went quiet. I continued. I left with $31. Your mother said I'd lived off your family for 4 years. Your sister said marrying you was already more than I deserved. You never said a word in my defense. That was in the past. Not for me. His control finally cracked. Claire, I came here to beg you. What more do you want? Do you really want to watch my family collapse? I looked at him. You wanted me to apologize for things I never did. Now your family has made real mistakes, and you want me to plead for you? The color drained from his face. I won't help you, and I won't take revenge either. Your family can face the consequences of its own choices, just as I faced mine. He had no answer. I stood. Julian suddenly reached for me, but Damien's guard stopped him before his hand got close. Panic finally entered his voice. Claire, does the past mean nothing to you? I paused. Months ago, that question might have hurt. Now I thought of Sophia leaving candy in Daisy's arms, Leo saving cake for me, Adrian writing down every name that could threaten me, and Damien telling me protection was never possession. I looked back at Julian. The past isn't a reason to let you keep hurting me. His hand slowly dropped. I left the conference room without another word. Damien waited at the end of the hall. He didn't ask whether I was upset or tell me I'd done the right thing. He only offered his hand the way he always did, leaving the choice to me. I placed my hand in his. "Is it over?" he asked. "It's over." Outside, a light rain had begun to fall. The car waited below the steps, and Damien held an umbrella over me as I got in. Across the street, a news screen was already running a story on the investigation into Whitmore Pharma. "What world?" I said quietly. That had once been the world I couldn't escape. Now it was disappearing behind the rain. Damien slid in beside me and closed the door. Home. I looked out the window, then back at him. Home. 3 weeks after the investigation into Whitmore Pharma began, the Marchetti Children's Arts and Safety Foundation replaced every one of its medical equipment suppliers. Damien never mentioned Julian again, and I didn't ask. News about the Whitmore family still turned up in the financial pages now and then, but I stopped following every update. The people who'd once pressed their weight down on me were finally dealing with consequences of their own making. Every morning when I woke, I heard Sophia outside my door, quietly debating with Daisy whether to wear the blue dress, Leo complaining down the hall that Adrian had stolen his waffle, and Adrian calmly pointing out that the waffle had been on his own plate the whole time. Marchetti Estate was still heavily guarded, but it no longer felt like only a fortress. After breakfast one morning, Damien set a document in front of me. I paused at the title, Appointment of Executive Director, Marchetti Children's Arts and Safety Foundation. "What is this?" "You're already doing the work," Damien said from across the table. "The foundation needs someone who actually cares what happens to these kids after the cameras leave." I looked at the document, my fingers resting over my own name. "You're sure you want me running it?" "I'm sure." Leo raised his hand immediately. "I vote yes." "This isn't a vote. It is now." Sophia lifted Daisy. Daisy votes yes too. Damien watched them argue and didn't stop them. He only slid the pen toward me. "This isn't part of our agreement. You can refuse." I picked up the pen and signed my name. A long time ago, walking out of the Whitmore house, all I'd wanted was a bed and a hot meal. Now what stood in front of me was so much more than shelter. Sophia was the first to throw her arms around me. "Does this mean Mom's going to help lots of kids now?" "I'll try." "Then I'll help too," Leo said immediately. "I'll handle the leftover desserts at the events." Adrian answered calmly. "That position is unnecessary." Damien finally let out a low laugh. A month later, Damien gave me a ceremony of our own. He said it wasn't for anyone else to see. Still, on the day of the wedding, the Marchetti family's private chapel was filled with candles, the black and gold crest hanging above the altar. Leo carried the flower basket and tried to slip 2 pieces of candy into his pocket halfway down the aisle. Adrian, holding the ring box, caught him immediately. "Don't eat until after the wedding." "Emergency backup candy," Leo whispered back. I stood at the chapel entrance watching them, wanting to laugh and cry at the same time. Damien waited at the altar in a black formal suit, a silver-gray tie set neatly beneath his collar, candlelight softening the hard edges he usually carried. I walked toward him. The first time I'd signed a marriage contract, I told myself it was only a transaction, clear terms, a safe room, a way out. Now, walking over a path of white roses, Sophia turned to look back at me from the front row. Leo winked. Adrian held the ring box steady, and Damien kept waiting. He extended his hand. This time, I didn't hesitate. The ceremony was short. After the vows, Damien slid the ring onto my finger, his hand steady as always, though his thumb paused for a second over my knuckle. "Claire," he said quietly, "this time, there's no expiration date." My eyes warmed. "Then I want to add one clause of my own," I said. He looked at me. "If I stay, it's because I choose to." Damien held my hand and answered softly, "Accepted." A quiet laugh moved through the chapel. Sophia couldn't help running over to hug my skirt. So you really won't leave now? I'll stay. She studied me for a long moment before placing Daisy in my arms. Then Daisy agrees too. I agree too. We already agreed a long time ago, Damien said, standing behind me, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. That night, the dining room was livelier than it had ever been. Sophia insisted the music box sit at the center of the table, the silver rabbit turning slowly through its old melody. Leo stole a second slice of cake while Victor scolded him for being childish, all while quietly pushing his own strawberry toward Sophia's plate. Damien sat beside me and poured me a glass of water. I looked around the long table and thought back to the rainy night I first walked through that gate. $31 in my wallet, cold rain in my shoes, and only one thought left in my head: find somewhere to survive. Now I had a room, a family crest, an old green car parked in the driveway, and children who came to my door every morning just to make sure I was still there, and a man who never once confused protection with possession. Sophia leaned against my arm, half asleep. Mom, will you still be here tomorrow? I bent down and kissed her forehead. Yes. Under the table, Damien took my hand. Outside the windows, the iron gates of the Marchetti estate stood silent in the night. Inside them, the lights burned warm, and white roses moved softly in the wind. I was no longer someone who'd merely been taken in by another house. Here, I had my name, my place, and a light waiting for me to come home.